Today we talk about what is effectively just the most scratchable holographic surface I have ever seen on a Psychic-type Pokemon card. That's right, friends, the Neo Discovery Espeon. And we talk about it today. But before we do, let's roll that intro. Hey Gengar Gang, what is going on? My name is Ryan, this is the Analytic Gengar, and welcome to another video. In today's video, friends, everything you need to know about Espeon, the #1 card from the Neo Discovery set. Now, today's video is one of a slowly but surely growing number of videos that I have here on the channel where I basically walk you through some of the more interesting and important notes about a particular vintage Pokemon card. Now, at this point I have 3, but one of the things I always encourage you all to do is definitely shout out down below in the comments the next card you want to see in these videos. Someone actually wrote in on Instagram to me and said, hey, I think this would be a cool card because of that crazy amount of holographic. I wonder if that makes it more difficult to grade given the fact that this is a Neo Discovery card on top of everything else. And so I was like, yeah, this sounds like a really good one. Ideally, I do want these videos probably out every week or 2 weeks, but we'll see how that goes. As you guys know, things can be a little busy at times. But speaking of which, if you like today's content, if you like the content on the channel, or you want to see a card that you love featured, definitely feel free to leave a like to let me know that this is a video series that you want to see grow and expand. And of course, hey, if you're not already, feel free to subscribe to join the Gengar Gang. But without further ado, friends, let's get started talking about the Espeon from Neo Discovery. So, as you can see, I am on Bulbagarden. Bulbagarden's a great, it's just Bulbapedia, but it's an excellent place to go if you want some information on cards. It's kind of weird because a pain in the neck is that many cards don't have an extensive amount of information, as is the case with this, and there are other cards that get tons of treatment, you know, like the Gold Star cards, like certain first edition cards, like obviously the starters from base set. There are certain cards that get more attention, is what I'm trying to say in shorter terms, right? So as it relates to Espeon, let's go ahead and first jump super quickly and take a look at the image of the card itself. Now this is taken off PSA's website, and as you can see, the card features a really nice look at Espeon. It is a stage 1 Pokemon, having been evolved from an Eevee, and it has 80 HP. Obviously, it came in a first edition and a unlimited print. You'll see over here the Neo Revelation set logo, and it is the Sun Pokemon with a length of 2 feet 11 inches and a weight of 58 pounds. It has 2 attacks, Bite and Psychic. It's ironically enough weak to Psychic, which I thought was interesting, and its Pokemon Pokédex entry reads, it uses the fine hairs that covers its body to sense air currents and predict its enemy's actions. Apparently, it's level 45. It is Pokédex number 196, and the illustrator is Atsuko Nishida. So, random fun facts there for you. Neo Rev was a relatively small set, 75 cards, so this is actually the first card, in case anybody's confused as to why that is, especially if you collect modern day sets. Back in the day, they did do a bit of a different structure to the way that sets were laid out. Very frequently, the holographics were the first cards in the set, and then it went through the commons and uncommons in sort of a mixed bag, and that's what we're seeing here. Now, the card itself has very little to no trivia about it. So the origin of the card and some random tidbits of trivia. Bite is actually a Pokemon move that Eevee can learn prior to its evolution into Espeon. So if you had your Eevee, it learned Bite and then it evolved into an Espeon in any of the games. That's how an Espeon would end up knowing a dark type move. If anybody knows a little bit about either the video game or, you know, just typing in general for Pokemon, it's very uncommon for a Pokemon to know a move that it is weak to, although it's not unheard of, and this is a case of that. Psychic, however, is a Psychic type move, and it is something that Espeon could learn in the Pokemon video games. So, you know, it's pretty neat because I like cards that don't just randomly pull like random attacks out of the air. Like I've seen cards with some rather interesting names for moves. And while I enjoy the fact that the TCG has made it a point not to exclusively pull from the moveset from video games, it is also nice to see examples like this where, you know, relatively simple, relatively straightforward, nothing out of the ordinary. The other thing to note is that this card's Pokédex entry actually comes from Pokemon Gold, so another interesting connection to the trading card game and the video game is that Pokemon Gold is where they quite literally copied the Pokédex entry at the bottom of the card from and pasted it down here. Now, from a collector's perspective, I think there are a couple major driving forces behind why this card is desirable and why, frankly, I chose to cover it today. One, the PSA 10 first editions are $4,000 cards plus. So in no uncertain terms, there's quite a bit of reasons why this card is a quite expensive card. One, it's an evolution, right? Anytime you see evolutions, there tends to be a lot of fanfare. The Generation 2 evolutions seem to be some of the most popular, and in many ways, I would argue that they may even rival or surpass their Generation 1 counterparts in Jolteon, Flareon, and Vaporeon. Specifically, Espeon and Umbreon are both really highly sought after. I think one of the major reasons for that is because these Pokemon frequently are synonymous with the Gold Star cards that came out in Generation 3, and although this card came out before Generation 3, I believe all of the fanfare over that Espeon Gold Star card has also generated some additional sort of, you know, intrigue into Espeon as a Pokemon when it comes to collectibles, and so I think this card may have indirectly benefited from the Gold Star and the hype that it has generated. The other thing to bear in mind specifically with this card is that I think it's just a really cool Pokemon card, right? It's a very simple artwork, and I give it to Nishida for, you know, a very simple, straightforward look at the Pokemon. It's very top-down. I've always said Espeon and Umbreon specifically very much remind me of cats, and so, you know, you very much see like a cat-esque pose. It's just kind of chilling, laying down. It looks like it may actually be on some sand and it's touching water, or at least that's how I have always seen this Pokemon card. So again, a really pretty, good-looking Pokemon card and a Pokemon subject in Espeon that is a fan favorite and has definitely and certainly benefited from a hype over a Gold Star card that has made it a little bit more desirable of a vintage collectible. Now, all things considered, from a grading perspective, my biggest concern / curiosity has always and consistently will be the amount of holographic pattern on this card. There are many cards out there that you look at it and you immediately begin rolling your eyes. Not because you're excited and not because you're annoyed, but because you realize how borderline impossible it should be to get a 10. When you have a card like this one, where I would say at least 50% of the artwork where my mouse is cursoring over is holographic pattern, all hope is already lost, because these cards are old. These cards have gone through a lot. Even if you open a Neo Discovery pack and pull this card, what are the chances it's going to be perfect? And then layer on top of that the fact that it's Neo Discovery. Any of the Neo sets, Neo Genesis, Neo Discovery, and Neo Destiny, are notorious for their terrible print quality. And what that means is that on top of everything else, it's likely that when you pull these cards out of the pack, they will sort of come from the factory with scratches on the holographic, burred edges, dents on the edges, and then you have to layer on top of that the fact that in 2021 these packs are going to be 20 years old. So 9 times out of 10 they weren't stored properly and they weren't preserved correctly, and you're really in a situation where, hey, things may not be as ideal for this card to pull off a 10. So, you know, one thing that I always say is when you're looking at Pokemon trading cards that you want to collect because of their, you know, trophy-like status, this is a card that very much meets that criteria. this is a card that is a fan favorite Pokemon. You know it's going to be sought after. It's very cute in my opinion, although that might be a little bit more subjective. And then on top of everything else, it's a Neo Discovery card, which means it's likely going to be low pop, and it's likely going to be something that people look for. And especially in a 10, it's going to be the best case scenario where it survived all of the factors I just iterated through and somehow managed to get the PSA 10, which is a feat in and of itself. So next up, let's take a look at the various populations and numbers. Now, for any fans of the channel, you know that what we'll do is I will certainly do my absolute best to cover the 9s and the 10s. Obviously, there are 8s, 7s, and every other number of grade available, and of course, I'm only looking at PSA data, but that's because it's probably the most easy to consume. It's probably indicative of the population of other graded cards as well, plus or minus any variances due to backups from the pandemic. And yeah, for the most part, you know, relatively simple, easy to understand data that's publicly available and is easy to consume. So I think for those reasons, that's again why I use PSA and why I have, you know, this particular part of the video set up the way that I do. So as it relates to the unlimited print of the card, you'll see that there are a total of 725 cards that have ever been graded. Interestingly enough, there's only one card with an autograph, and I think that's pretty neat. So if you're the owner of that card for 87 bucks whenever you bought it, that is pretty cool. Now, as you can see, some additional items, you can see that most of the cards remain relatively low in price. It isn't until the, give or take, PSA 8s that you hit $175 using the most recent prices, and then from there, you're really kind of seeing some of the increases in prices. And then, of course, for PSA 10s, the price jumps drastically from about $242 for that most recent price all the way up to $1,900 for that most recent price. Now, in terms of population, of the 725 cards that exist that have been graded for the Espeon Unlimited Neo Discovery Holographic, there are a total of 63 that graded a PSA 10, again with an average sale price of about $1,500 and a most recent sale price of $1,900. Those 63 PSA 10 slabs are officially 8.68% of the total population of unlimited Espeons, and they make up less than 10%. So just as I had kind of theorized, there's a very unlikely scenario that plays out where this card is going to grade a 10, and it's again primarily driven by how much holographic is on the card. Now for PSA 9s, there are 273 PSA 9 Espeon Unlimiteds, and again, out of the total of 725, that is 37.66%, which means that, yeah, there's a very large gap that exists between the 9s and the 10s, not only from the price perspective, but also then from the population perspective. It's probably by default assigned a 9, and then you're probably looking to see where something else is wrong that's going to get you to the 8 or the 7. And then that's also indicative because if you look at it from the perspective of how many more 9s there are than there are 10s, you're talking about 4.33 times, right? So if we took the 273 versus the 63, you're looking at about 1 PSA 10 for every 4 PSA 9s, just to put that into perspective. And that number would get even more hilariously funny if you added in the 8s to that equation as well. So certainly the unlimited version of the card is a little bit interesting because the PSA 10s are certainly a rarity, and being under that 10% mark is usually a good indicator that the overall population that has been submitted hasn't necessarily been in the best of quality. You're looking at a 1 in 10 chance to get a PSA 10, and that's if there isn't an obvious defect on the card that's going to immediately knock it down a grade. Now, as it relates to the first edition version of the card, here is the image that we were looking at a little bit earlier, and as you can see, the first editions get a nice fancy little page with the set registries, blah blah blah. Moving on, here's what I was talking about earlier. The 8s are about 400, the 9s are about 750, and the Gem Mint 10s about $4,500, at least according to the SMR. The SMR obviously has also a bit of an awkward disconnect with the overall market. You know, they tend to be a little bit higher. That's why I said it's about a $4,000 card, and that's because, especially right now, there is an awkward bit of depreciation happening to many Pokemon cards. So ironically enough, many cards saw a high price, the SMR recorded it at that high price, and then the prices have actually dipped down since. Now, for Gem Mint 10s, there are a total of 80. There are a total of 588 cards that have ever been submitted and graded by PSA for the first edition Neo Discovery Espeon holographic. So, 80 cards over the total of 588 is a total of 13.61%. So actually a little bit less rare of a opportunity or a occurrence than its unlimited counterpart, which is interesting because usually you think that the first editions would be a little bit more beat up, would be a little bit more played with, would be a little bit more submitted. But interestingly enough, one thing rare and interesting about this particular card is that the unlimited version of the card is being submitted more from a volume perspective, at least based on the current data. But although there are more unlimited cards, about 725 of them currently graded with PSA, there are more Gem Mint 10 first editions. So just an interesting quirk in the data that I thought worth to point out. Then, of course, there are the PSA 9s, of which there are 307. Out of the 588, that is 52.21%. So 52% of all cards submitted to PSA for the Espeon First Edition Holo are PSA 9s, which is even worse than the 37.66% we saw with the regular unlimited version of the card. As a multiplier, that means there are about 7.35 PSA 9s for every one PSA 10 that exists. So, you know, numerically speaking, it's a lot greater. But the most important thing to note is that there are less than 100 PSA 10s, which is pretty impressive from a numerical perspective. But do bear in mind that PSA 10s for the first edition, for one reason or the other, are a little bit more common. Now, the way I think about it, this is usually indicative of one of two things. Either the people who are submitting these cards are very cautious about the stock that they submit, and so, you know, lesser worthy cards just don't get submitted and therefore never get graded a PSA 7, a 6, a 5, you know. Otherwise, this could very easily end up being a 2,000, 3,000, 10,000 population report. But the thing is that people are very selective about what they do. Or, and this is probably not the case, there's just a really great print run of these cards, and so, you know, obviously there's going to be a very high number of 9s and 10s. Now, we know for a fact that Neo Rev and Neo Discovery and Neo Genesis were not that great and not that cool and not that worthy in terms of print quality. So it's very likely that people are being very calibrated about what cards get submitted, hence the evidence for things like basically nothing shy of a 5, aside from 2, aside from a few, arguably a small handful, less than, at this point, I think it's 32. Yeah, so 32 cards under a PSA 7. So it's one of those things. People are probably just being very cautious about it, especially because it's a first edition card. And that's not the case, by the way, if you go and look at something like any Charizard card, where you're going to see every single one of these populated, because that's just the nature of the beast. But with all that said, friends, thanks again for checking out another video. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, hey, feel free to leave a like on the video. Let me know down below what card you would like to see covered next in one of these what to know videos. And of course, if you like today's content, the best thing you can do to help support the channel is subscribe to join the Gengar Gang. But with all that said, friends, thank you again for checking out another video. I appreciate your viewership as always, and we will talk soon. Peace.